All right, I got Coach Dave Gleason in the house today, and we are just going to go right after it today because the topic we're talking about here at the Alliance is so important that I don't want to waste any time, excuse me, today getting to the nuts and bolts. So, Dave, thanks for being back in the room with me.
Thank you for giving me another opportunity to share because as you well know, these topics are so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, what we want to do today, Dave, is just bring light and really shine the light on this space and athletic journey of
Mm.
moving from competitive sport into career. Your professional, you really for so long embrace the identity of being an athlete and we become very proficient in that, very professional in that. And then all of a sudden it is gone, right? The way
Mhm.
that we know it or the way we've always played it changes. So I would love for you to reflect on your athletic journey and just describe the moment when you realized your sports career was coming to an end. What did you experience?
Okay, thanks. So, in our last interview, I tried to be as succinct as I could, and I will this time as well. My athletic career didn't really begin until I was in second grade. Which is not necessarily late, but it seemed late once I found out there were sports out there. I had this kid Pete that moved in next door, and one of the first things he asked me was like, "Hey, do you play soccer?" And I was, you're in second grade. Yeah, sure, but I played in the backyard. My monkey bars. I didn't know anything about anything. So it started in second grade, and I just fell in love with soccer, and then by extension, other sports, because that's when you meet other kids and you start playing basketball. I tried baseball and tennis, and my two loves really were soccer and basketball. And I had a steadily good career all the way through high school. I captained our high school soccer team to a Division I state title. It was one of those stories like Hoosiers, like we were not supposed to beat this big city team, but we were just a whole bunch of country bumpkins that believed in ourselves, and that was it. And we that was probably the highlight of my career. But then I was able to move on and play Division II college soccer in New Hampshire, where we won the ECAC championship, got a couple NCAA berths. I captained that team, topped out at, I think I was all New England or something. It was just college soccer was just the best overall experience. And then it just abruptly ended with one loss. And as we had spoken about before, that was not something I was prepared for.
Yeah. Yeah. Share a little bit more around that, Dave. I know, and for those of you watching who have not seen that last interview, I'm going to link it so that you can access that as well. But Dave, let's dig in to the on the heels of that last loss. What was that experience like for you? How did you respond?
Yeah, we lost to a conference rival. It was the first or second round of the NCAAs. And my memory, it's one of those watershed moments in my life that I'll never forget. It's like it happened yesterday. So, as we get older, we lose details with certain memories. But this was in the shower room, the water just falling over me, and I was just I was crying uncontrollably. And it wasn't, and I realized immediately it wasn't that we lost. The overwhelming feeling that I had was, what do I do now?
Mm,
And it had nothing to do with what do I do once I graduate from college in the spring. I already had some things lined up, and I did. I think I was back in my parents' house for 2 weeks before I was packing up everything I owned, driving to New York for my first personal training job in a large health club, and never looked back. It wasn't what am I going to do for an occupation? It's it was, what am I going to do? Like, who am I?
Yeah.
Like, what everything that I did up until that point without realizing it pointed back to soccer. And what I didn't realize is that it was in an unhealthy way. But that moment, I felt like I lost every part of me, every part of my identity. It was literally like a death. It was something I mourned, I grieved. I did. It was just awful. I walked away from the game because it was so painful. I didn't play competitively again for 15 years. I just thought, well, I'll just dive into my career and try to dive into some other things to replace what soccer was for me. But nothing seemed to add up. So I needed help beyond just finding something else to do for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It's such a real experience, Dave. And I think grief is such a tricky emotion to describe because we all experience it so differently.
Mm,
But it's also something that, especially as I've talked about it more in our Alliance community, that many external sources, coaches, parents, athletic directors, they don't even realize, unless they've experienced themselves, that it truly is a grieving process. There is a loss for the vast majority of athletes, especially when they're in the top of their game, as they transition out. Things like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance, right? All of those stages of grief. I'd
mhm.
love to know, and I'm curious, how did you struggle? And I know you're articulating some of this struggle, but how did grief come into play for you? How did it kind of manifest in your life? What were the decisions or the things that were coming up as a result of this loss or this void for that
Mm.
season of your life?
Sure. For me, it was depression.
Okay.
It was depression, and it was really what I learned later on through therapy. It was anxiety-driven depression, not the other way around. A lot of people say, "Oh, I have depression and anxiety," which is true, but there's a balancing act in our brains a lot of times. So, as high as I would come trying to chase something new or a new challenge or engage in some self-medicating strategies to try to get through my anxiety because I still had this overwhelming, what am I doing? I don't know what to do. I feel lost. Severe depression, which would also lead to procrastination and isolation. And I thought about this a lot when I woke up this morning because I knew we were talking, and something came to me I think is really important that I share. I had a codependent relationship with my sport.
Mm,
So when my sport ended, I literally didn't have the ability to make decisions for myself because soccer wasn't a driving force. So like, what is my driving force? I'm just so lost. Like, I remember thinking, how much money do I take out of at the time, the ATM? Like I couldn't make simple decisions like that. And I was lucky enough to be working in, which may lead into one of your next questions. I was working in a health club, one of those multi-purpose health clubs that has fitness and racquetball and swimming and all these different things. And back then we had all these like little cubby mailbox things for like our mail or notes from our clients, or our paycheck would go in there. We also had a therapist that worked in the facility. His name was Jed, and I had knew nothing about therapy, but I was at the time also participating in some really destructive behavior. I think just trying to numb the pain that I was in and not feel the anxiety or the depression or the sense of loss or the grief or any of those things. And it got to the point where I was buying alcohol because I couldn't sleep unless I had alcohol before I went to bed. And there was one night I went to take a drink because I couldn't sleep. It was the middle of the night, and it just something said, "What are you doing? Like this is, you know, what are you doing?" So lo and behold, I wrote a little note on a piece of paper to Jed saying, "Hey, I'm a personal trainer. I work in the facility. I've never met you. I really think I need help." And he got right back to me, and we had a session. And this was the first time the word codependent ever came up. And I read the book. The first thing he did was hand me a book called Codependent No More from Melody Beattie. I've read that book 5 times in my life since. And it really helped me cope with my feelings of attachment to the sport that were not healthy. It helped me detach from the thoughts of soccer's my complete identity. It helped me reattach myself to me and what I value and what's valuable about me and who I am and how valuable I am to other people. And that really started a journey for me of getting out of that hole and becoming healthier from a mental and emotional standpoint. So I think one piece of advice coming out of this is if you're feeling like you're going downhill, or you have that type of personality where you could self-medicate or get into a rut of self-destructive behavior, seek help. There's so much help out there. And what I didn't know until I met Jed was you're not alone, because I felt, and I did it to myself as well. I isolated myself. I felt so isolated and alone. I didn't have my teammates, my coach, my sport, my the field was my safe place. I didn't have that. So what I'd like to say again is you're not alone. There's so much help out there, whether it's a parent, a best friend, a brother, a sister, or a trained professional that will listen to you and help you find the answers within yourself that you need to be more productive and to love and care for yourself in the way that you deserve.
Mm. So powerful, Dave, and such great insight and advice for our student athletes in this space. And I mean, it's exactly why the Alliance was born, because from the second grade, you were in a default community. You built your identity around that community, which is not a bad thing, right?
Hmm.
And we'll talk a little bit about how your lessons and the discipline from sport set you up for success long term. But the reality is sometimes in the blink of an eye, you look behind you and that default community is no longer. So you have to
Hmm.
be, what we talk about in the Alliance is being a community creator, to be
Hmm.
proactive in the space of building your community around the periphery. And the Alliance comes in and is allowed to service athletes in that way, providing them a community beyond the game with a lot of like-minded individuals, and the catalyst for change in this space. So
Right.
I appreciate your vulnerability around that space and that season of your life, because it's so real and it's so under discussed. Um, but kind of shifting in to the flip side
Hmm.
of that transition and that experience, we know that there are so many lessons, there's so many characteristics, there's so many habits that come from being an athlete that set us up quite literally to be in the top 10% in whatever we choose to do. So I'd love
Hmm.
to kind of just anchor in on what are those things, for you that helped you through that period of darkness, but also to thrive later in life that you acquired as a result of being an athlete.
I'm glad you asked that question. A lot of times, if you're an athlete now and you're a bit younger, you're going to find as you grow older that when you reflect back, you'll be able to think, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, those are the lessons that I learned when I went through those things, good and bad. There's a lot of positives, obviously, that are associated with playing sport. One thing for me as I look back, 'cause I definitely didn't know it at the time. I was just so in love in an obsessive way with the sport that, I would go to a soccer camp all day long and then practice after I got home until my legs were falling off. I just loved it. I want to say, yeah, it was the desire to be the best, but it really wasn't. It was the journey of becoming better at a skill, and no matter what the skill was, and no matter how long it took, I got better at it. I got proficient at it. I got efficient at it. So then I could actually use it in a game as well. And now I can look back and say, whether it's in business or relationships or all the other aspects of life that are so important, I have that drive and that ability to just try to be the best version of myself in that realm, no matter what it is, knowing it could take time, but it's that old saying, whatever you water grows, right? So if I'm going to water isolation and depression and anxiety, that's going to grow and overwhelm me. But if I can water, if you will, or really push in terms of my business or certification that I want I want to obtain for my career, or being the best coach now that I can possibly be, being the best boyfriend or husband or stepdad or dad that I can possibly be. There's all these aspects of life that we are lucky enough to use what we learn in sport. I just feel like now I look back and what an advantage to also be able to like have the executive functioning of I'm not going to play soccer and be better at it tomorrow. I'm going to have this goal and I'm going to go for it. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm going to be the best that I possibly can be. Um, so I think like overall, that's how I've been able to use sport in my experience growing in sport in life. My experience was I didn't have anyone to show me that early enough, so I didn't have to go through what I went through. Now, I also don't regret that because now I'm in a position I'm uniquely qualified to help people that I used to be because I've been through it and educated myself on it. So I'm so grateful for that, and I wouldn't do it over again differently, as painful as it was.
I love that, Dave, because a true transformation of grief to gratitude, right? When we can experience gratitude about our process and reflection of the process, it completely changes the game for what's coming for us. And as you mentioned, and I think this is one of the missions of the many for the Alliance, is to be able to really bring athletes to a space of gratitude a little bit quicker without actually minimizing the grief process that they have to and need to and deserve to go through. I mean, it is kind of a rite of passage when you have been an athlete that you get to look back and say, man, this feels like a loss. Because if it
Right.
wasn't, I'd question why'd we even
Mhm.
do it, right? There is going to be
Right.
a sense of loss. So expect it. Expect this to happen, but it doesn't have to carry on for decades.
Yes, 100%. And it also, I think these days, young athletes especially get clouded with social media as well because all of the emphasis is how many goals, how many
Mm.
accolades, how many wins. And the other thing that I wish I had at a younger age that I'm so grateful to know now is to be able to ask myself questions like, what did I do today to be a good teammate?
Mm.
How did it feel to give that great of an effort in the game today, win or lose? Because you're going to win, you're going to lose, you're going to, get a good grade on a test, you're not going to get a good grade. You're going to do well on a project at work, and then there's going to be some maybe your boss doesn't appreciate, or it's not the work that they really wanted. How do you bounce back from that? Can you say to yourself when you're looking in the mirror, I gave it everything I had. I'm really proud of what I put forward. I'm a good teammate at work or in school, or I'm a good friend, or all the things that make you a human being beyond scoring goals. 'Cause I can tell you this, you guys, this is from straight up experience. And this is to prove a point, not to boast. I held the scoring record at my high school, which got me into the Hall of Fame in my high school for 25 plus years. They're just numbers. They're literally just numbers. And during my Hall of Fame speech, what I talked about were my teammates. And one of the things that I said was there were times that I thought I was successful in high school despite my teammates or my coaches or whatever, but it was all because of them. It was a team effort. I couldn't have done anything without them. So, those are the questions I want you to ask yourself are what kind of teammate was I today? What kind of opponent was I? Was I respectful? Did I bring the best out of my competitor? Allow them to bring the best out of me? And then at the end of the game, be able to shake hands and look at them in the eyes, almost to say, I'm so grateful we just had that battle because you just made me a better athlete and a better person. Because that's what sport can give you if you're recognizing it.
Mm. And such a small simulation of life to come, right, Dave? As we
Mm-hmm.
know, decades out from our
100%.
careers, right?
100%.
Yeah. So get the reps in. Adversity is part of the game. Grief is part of the game. Loss is part of the game. But it is perfectly positioning you as an athlete for what is next for you in the next game, which is your biggest game yet, right? Career, family, life itself, right, Dave?
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Dave, for joining us. You did mention a book, I believe, in this interview. I'm going to link that in the description below for anybody who feels that could be a resource for you. As always, we are honored to be here. We are a nonprofit at Beyond the Game Alliance. So if you have in your heart to give to these athletes and support them in the transition from sports career to professional career, you can learn more about ways to give at beyondthegamealliance.org. Dave, again, thank you for your time and your story today.
Thank you so much for letting me share, Julie. Appreciate it.